My name's Sarah. I've been coming to conventions now for 10 years, but this is my first ever panel, so please bear with me. And my badge name is Reagan Winged. You'll find me online somewhere, I'm sure. Okay, so just first, we're just going to do a really super brief history of jewellery making, in case anyone's interested. So, jewellery is the universal adornment, so wherever you go, there's always been jewellery, and there's always been an adornment. There's no real necessity for jewellery, we all know it, but we love it. It dates back to prehistoric age, where shells and animal bones were used to make jewellery, so we're talking way before anyone can really know what the reason is why we have jewellery. Eventually, once metalwork advanced, jewellery making became a representation of status. So people who had gold and silver jewellery would be higher, and people would use bronze and copper if they were of a lower class. As time and methods progressed, pieces started to get more intricate and more special. I won't be going into anything amazing, but that's just a little brief history. So the basics. So where to start? So that's probably the question I get asked most about when I talk about jewellery making, is where did I start? I started by buying kits. There's so many kits available out there, and they have nearly everything that you need in them, except for the basic tools, which I'll go through in a minute. It's probably the easiest place to start, because you get the pattern, and you get to keep that pattern, and you can make it over and over again, and it has all the instructions in it as well. Another way to start, if you're feeling really brave and a bit more adventurous, is to just buy some supplies and have a play. Just get some wire, get some beads, get some thread, have a go. The worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to cut it apart, take all the beads off and start again. There's really nothing that you can majorly mess up when you're starting. Just have a go. So the tools you'll need, this is probably when most people ask about. So, bead needles. So for jewellery making you get special bead needles. They're longer than normal needles and they're thinner than normal needles, so you can get them through seed beads, things like that. Round nose pliers. I'll show you how to use round nose pliers later. They're, as the name suggests, they've got a round nose at the end. It's used for making little loops in wires and things like that. Flat nose pliers. So they're used more for holding things in place and for bending in straight lines. Wire cutters. If you're using wire, you're going to need wire cutters. Please use jewellery pliers and jewellery cutters. Do not buy from your local B&Q their wire cutters or their pliers. They're too big, they're going to ruin and dent all your wire, and you're just going to end up making a big mess. Get the jewellery making ones. They're not expensive. You can get a little set for about 10 quid, and it's got all 3 of them in. So just have a look. Beading wire, as I've mentioned, or tiger tail, which is a bit more flexible than wire. Scissors, so that's if you're using thread, you're going to need to use scissors. Don't use scissors on wire. I know it seems a little bit obvious to some people, but if you use your scissors on your wire, you'll damage your scissors and they're not going to cut anything. You need some glue for finishing off thread pieces. So when you do a knot, you glue it so that that knot doesn't come apart. Beading thread, as I've said. Findings, so I've got a slide about all the different findings. They're like the finishing pieces that you need, so they're like the finishing off the parts, the connections, all those sorts of things. And you may need other tools depending on what project you're doing. So for example, I've got some bead looms over here. So if you're doing like a cuff or something like that, you'd use a loom. I've got one set up actually. Like that. I'll pass it around so you can have a look. And so you loom the piece along to make a full cuff. You can also make little panels and stuff out of them. People make little banners out of them, hang them up, and people make bookmarks out of them even, if you've got thin enough beads. So findings. There's loads of different findings. I could do a panel on findings. There's so many different ones out there. So I'm only going to cover the ones that you're probably going to need for whatever cosplay items you're looking at. So jump rings, so they are a staple. Jump rings are your connections. And I'll go through how you open jump rings properly and how you close them properly, because probably easier. rings. There's some jump rings to have a look at. They come in all different colours, all different finishes, and they're just for connecting pieces together. Really basic. Lobster clasps, so they're probably the most common types of clasps. Eye pins, so eye pins and head pins are very similar. One has a flat end and one has a rounded end. So with the eye pins, it's to make two connections either end of a bead, and with a head pin, that's to have like a finishing stop, and then the bead can dangle. Spacer beads. So spacer beads come in two different types of spacer beads. You get fancy spacer beads like these, which tend to use, like, if you've got really big beads, like the beads in Eurasia uses on his necklace. If you wanted to have a little bit of space in between, you'd use one of these. It has kind of a domed edge and it just sits in between, gives them a bit of space. The other ones we've got are just plain ones. They're just plain little metal beads. And those normally used just to finish off ends, like if you've got a necklace and you have an extension chain, you put a little bead at the end just to finish it off, just to give it that finishing touch and make it look a little bit more professional. Ear wires, so my first projects were really earrings because they are quick and easy to make. For example, my spark earrings that I wore the other day. They are literally just an ear wire, 2 jump rings, and a bead. If you want to have a look at them. So they are really, that's probably the simplest that you can get. Just 2 jump rings and a binding, and you're done. Ribbon ends, so if you're looking at doing a choker or something, then there's special endings called ribbon ends. They clasp onto the end to prevent any fraying, and then you just put the clasps on the end, whatever chain you need for fastening. When you make a choker, please always put an extension cord, like an extension bit, because as the day goes on, you'll probably need to let it out a little bit. Bead caps, so with some beads, you can use bead caps. It gives them a little bit of a finishing touch, makes them just look a little bit more elegant. I've got something to show you where people can have a look. And chain. If you're doing any chain work, you're going to need some chain. Chain comes in all sorts of different styles. You can get precious chain, so you can get gold and silver chain to craft with. I wouldn't suggest it as your first point of call. If you buy any chain in the UK, it will pretty much be guaranteed to be nickel free. Don't buy chain from China. It won't be nickel free and it will turn you green. I learnt this the hard way. Yeah, chain comes in all different styles, all different gauges. You can get really delicate, pretty chains. You can get really big, chunky chains. Depending on what your project is, depends on what you buy. Just have a look. Go out there, have a look. You can even get some of these things in haberdasheries. Like some of these things you can just get at your normal haberdashery. So have a look. Kits. I haven't listed any kits of actual, because I'm not plugging anyone here. I'm not selling you people's kits. Just showing you what's out there. So you get kits from rings to necklaces to little earring kits, which won't cost very much. They're really, really super cheap. And then much more elaborate things. As I say, you can quickly go from making these little Christmas earrings to making that ring up there, then moving on to this necklace, then moving on to something like this. It's very quick development. Once you get a hang of the jump rings and things like that, you can find that you can pretty much pick up any project and go, oh, well, I kind of know how to do that now. I can go and have a go. So, just kits are really useful just to getting your confidence up to start with. Cosplay jewellery. So the problem with anime jewellery. So the problem with anime jewellery will really be the lack in detail. There are so many animes out there that the jewellery just is overlooked a little bit. It will show you very basic jewellery. It won't show you any of the detail. So sometimes you can get lucky with concept art drawings. You can get really nice pictures of jewellery and get a real clasp on what exactly is really totally 100% perfect. And other times, you're going to get a very basic picture. I know they do zoom in on Howell's jewellery before anyone says. But, you know, if you just had this picture to work with, all you can see is he's got little earrings, a blue dangle and the ring. That's not much to go on. And in your cosplay, you might want to make it a little bit more detailed to make it a little bit more interesting. But that's also the good thing. It can be a good thing. So if there isn't a lot of detail, just add some in. No one's going to come up to you and say, that's far too much detail. Don't put that much effort into your work. Don't do that. You can do it as detailed or as non-detailed as you want. But if you put a little bit more detail into it, it will tend to look a little bit more realistic. So some top tips. If you are looking at some fan art, so I've chosen Moana's necklace because there's lots of Moana necklaces out there that you can just buy, but you can always make one, and it will probably cost you about the same to make it as it will to buy it in the shop. So why not have a go? So the first thing you need to look at is the parts of the necklace. So I focused on the main, the brown part of the necklace. So I wanted to find something similar that I could adapt to use that. So I found this pattern. And as you can see, it's quite similar. It'd be quite easy to change that pattern and make it into the pattern from Moana's main chain. So it's just taking the pictures, having a look, and then go out, see what kits there are, see if you can match something up. Once you're a bit more advanced, you'll be able to go, well, I've got this pattern in my stash. I'll just change this a little bit. And like I say, the worst thing that happens is it looks a little bit of a mess. You cut the cord, you take the beads off, you start again. There's no end of the world when you're doing jewellery making. Just because if it gets in knots, it gets in knots. Start again. It's really not the end of the world. I've had so many friends who go, I've got in a mess, I've got in a tangle, I don't know what to do. And you know, they get really panicked about it, and I'm just like, just put it down, step away. When you come back, if you can't rectify it, if you can't untangle it, then start again. It doesn't. Once you've done it once, you'll be surprised how quickly it is to just go through that stage again. You go, oh, I know where I went wrong. Patterns. I've only got this slide for patterns because I've got lots of pattern books. So, at the end, if you want to come and have a look, do have a look. I'll take my folder around because it's got lots of different bits in it. The other thing about patterns is that a lot of them are drawing patterns. So a lot of them will be images that you can look at, and you can just do it from the images. For example, I have several Japanese magazines with patterns in. I can't read Japanese. I have no idea what any of the words say. It doesn't matter, because they have brilliant pictures, such as that, which will show you exactly what you need to do. So you don't need to speak the language. You don't need to know what the words say. Once you've got a little bit of knowledge, you'll know what those beads are. You'll know the rough sizes, and you'll be able to gauge how to do it. And that just takes by doing a couple of, like I say, just buy a couple of kits. Just have a look online. I will go through a few places you can get kits, but I'm by no means telling you have to buy them there. There are lots of options. So, using head pins and eye pins is probably why a few of you are here to actually learn a few little skills. And I have rushed through this, and I apologise. Oh, well, I have rushed through this a lot. Sorry. So, using head pins and eye pins. So when you have a head pin, the first thing you need to do is bend it at a right angle. So that's what this first image shows you. So you bend it into a right angle. You'd normally have that against the bead. So you probably have quite a large bead or even a small bead. Bend it at an angle, and that's your first step. As easy as that. That's the first step. And there's only 2 steps. There were 3 steps. So that's third of the way there. Once you've got to there, you just need to cut it to about 1 centimetre. Once you've got 1 centimetre, that's about the right size. You then take a pair of the round nose pliers, which I have here. So you can just see they are literally just pliers with a round nose. That is all they are. They are not very fascinating. Those are magnetic though, so that's kind of fun. It's fun to pick up things with them and go, oh.
Got the power.
Got the power. I got those from the range. So, and they weren't, it was like £3 for that pair. I like working with a larger pair. You can get these small little sets. This is what I started with. They're adorable, they're wonderful, they're so cute. But if you are making a piece of jewellery for the day and you're doing this, your hand gets really cramped really fast. So if you're planning on doing something elaborate, then buy a pair of longer handles. It's much nicer on your hands. But if you're only looking to do a couple of little bits every now and then, it's only going to be 5-10 minutes you're working with, these are really cheap. You don't need to buy expensive tools to be a jewellery maker. Anyway, so yeah, what you do is you start at the end and then you just turn the pliers around. If you want to see a video of this, just YouTube it. There are loads of videos out there showing you how to do this sort of thing. But you literally just start at the end and you just turn. You just pinch and turn. And that will give you a nice round end that you can then attach a jump ring to, and a chain, and a clasp, and you can make your own special piece. I mean, this is all worked with head pins, attaching pieces together, and eye pins. That's all it is. And split rings. It's really cool. They are actually two separate pieces, they were just tangled together.
Sure. Good save.
Do you want the evidence? But yes, so that's probably the simplest thing and probably the thing you will use the most. So you will always need this skill. Unless you're not using wire. Maybe. Opening jump rings. Please don't open your jump rings and go, whoop. Open them apart like that. That is not how you open a jump ring. If you open a jump ring that way, you're going to lose the shape. And if you lose the shape too much, the way it hangs will just look a bit janky, a little bit off. What you do is you take both sides and then you pull them apart like laterally. Do you understand what I mean? If you don't, just say.
Horizontal and vertical. Don't do it horizontally, do it vertically.
Yeah.
You want to twist them up and down.
Like they're passing each other, yeah. So you don't want them moving away from each other. You want them moving like that. Does that make sense? So the ends don't move apart, they move that way. If you want me to show you at the end, I will be more than happy to show people how to do it. But if you're going to use jump rings, and if you want to move on to things like chainmail and stuff, then you're going to need to know how to open a jump ring properly. Just to make it, I haven't actually done any chainmail yet. It is on my to-do list. A jewellery board. I personally don't use jewellery boards, mainly because when I started making jewellery, they weren't really readily available, so I just learned how to do it without them. Jewellery boards are really nice for setting out your piece. So you can set out all the beads that you want in your necklace. So if you can see, they've got some channels here, and you just space out your beads as you want them. So it'll help you keep your pattern in order. So if you had like red big, blue little, big yellow, and then you repeated that round and round, you can space it out on the board, and then you can just follow it through with your needle. It makes it a lot easier than having 3 piles of beads and going, I need that one, then that one, then that one, then that one. It just helps you space it out first, and then you know you're going to get it in line. They are really useful. I know lots of people that do use them, but because I didn't use one in the start, I just don't use one. It's just an extra piece for me. But if you really want to get into it, then it's a really good way of designing your necklace. You can also use it for like bracelets and stuff as well. I say necklaces because that tends to be what people want to make. If you want to make something else, then let me know and I'll try and help you in finding a way to learn how to do that. So these different types of beads. I could also do a panel on just the types of beads. There are so many different shapes in beads. You know, they're not just round or round or round. There's different finishes, and there's different shapes. So you've got cube beads, you've got round faceted, you've got round, just round. So they don't have a faceted. If you don't know, is where it's sort of like cut edges. So it's kind of like a gemstone effect sort of thing. I don't know if you can quite see it on this, but there are some facets on here, on the thing. And they all come in different sizes. So they normally do them in millimeters, or they just do them in size. So sizes go up and down in 2s generally. So you have 6, which is the biggest, then it goes down to 8, then it goes down to 10, and then if you get any smaller, yes it does. Then you're getting ridiculously tiny, and you'll probably start moving on to seed beads. Seed beads are a bit different. Seed beads are like this. They're the tiny little beads that you're probably used to seeing. These come in different sizes as well. So you will see sometimes there'll be smaller ones and bigger ones in your pattern. As long as you just use the one up and one down with sizes, then you're fine. Also, when you buy kits, the useful thing is they always tell you the sizes of the beads. So if you want to make that kit in a different colour, you just need to find the same size, but different colour. You can get other different finishes. You can get Delicia beads. These are super tiny. I hate using these, personally. I will pass them around so you can see how tiny they are. It takes a lot of patience. I would step away and do it in stages. Don't work with them all day, you will go cross-eyed. But yeah, they're used. I mainly bought those because I have a book that tells you how to make boxes out of beads, and I thought that was fun. But they'd also be really good for like weaving on the looms and things like that. Like I say, there's magatamas, which are little drop beads. There's pearl beads. There's all sorts of different things. Oval beads, heart-shaped beads, star-shaped beads. You name it, they've probably made it in that shape. Just go out and have a look. When buying beads, try and buy all your beads from the same provider. If you're buying seed beads, try and buy not from Chinese eBay stores. I only say this because they're not very consistent in their sizes. So you'll see on some of the pieces I have used those beads, and they're just not a regulated size. They're a bit all over the shop. Some are bigger, some are smaller, some are flatter. They're just a little bit messy, and you end up throwing away quite a few beads because they're just not workable. If you buy from a reputable place, or if you buy a make that's well known, there's a few. There's Miyuki beads, Toho beads. I personally use Miyuki beads because I think they're the best, personally. But they are a uniform shape. So if you're doing something like the loom piece, you will have a nice edge to it. It'll all be consistent. And if you're looking at doing something and having it really finished, that's probably what you want to look for. Bead materials. So beads come in lots of different materials. There's plastic, which is obviously the cheapest and most readily available. Honestly, just they're everywhere, plastic beads. You can buy them in the range, you can buy them anywhere. And they come in all glorious shapes and sizes. I do use some plastic beads for some things. If you're looking for a costume that you're only going to do once or twice, you don't really want to buy really expensive beads. You don't want to spend all that money and then probably never wear it again. So if you can find a plastic bead, it's probably perfect. Glass is the most common, I would say, past plastic. So all seed beads tend to be glass. You can get glass lampwork beads. You can get all sorts of different glass beads. I have one here, for example, that's just a big glass bead with a dragon on it. It's a bit unusual for a bead, but it's all glass. Glass isn't that fragile in beads unless it's hollow like that one. It's not that fragile. Don't worry. What I mean to say is you don't want to When you're doing the head pins, for example, you have to put a little bit of pressure on that bead if you're doing it close to the bead. I found this out when I tried to do my Ursula earrings from shell. Shell is also quite fragile, and if you're turning that degree and it just puts that little bit of pressure on, you're going to make your hole way bigger, then your head pin's going to fall through, then you can't use that bead because that bead's now been made useless. I did it a couple of times. I've been jewellery making for a good 6-7 years, and I did that the other day. So honestly, you know, we're not perfect, even if we've been doing it a long time. You make mistakes. Luckily, a lot of beads come in packs of at least 10. Even if you buy big things like the lightning bolts I pass around and stuff, they'll come in packs of 10, so you've got a good chance of getting it right. So don't worry about a couple breaking, just calm down, it'll be fine. Eventually I just sort of have to do it a little bit up. There's always a way around it. You can get bone beads. They're quite expensive because they're made of bone, and bone's not a really readily sourced thing, you know, and it's not something that a lot of people look at. A lot of people don't look at buying bone beads because they're a bit squibbed out by it. I personally don't know. Polymer clay, so Fimo, you know Fimo, that sort of stuff. You can actually get kits from Fimo for making your own polymer beads. So if you want to give that a go, why not have a go? They're normally relatively cheap, and you'll find some places that do them readily made. So if you're not feeling confident about making them, you can always get someone else to make them. Wooden beads, you can get metal beads, and you can get precious stone beads and stone beads. So you can get stone beads that aren't precious, so they're not like precious stones, like rubies and stuff like that. And by the way, I wouldn't use rubies, they're expensive. You're probably not going to use precious stone ever, let's face it, but it is an option if you really want to go all out. Cords and wires. So there's a few different cords and wires that you can use for different necklaces. It depends on what you want at the end of the day. You have to look at your source material and decide what it looks most like. So you've got leather cord, which is probably one of the most common ones. If you're using leather cord, you're probably going to be putting beads onto the head pins so that you can then string it onto the cord. Or you're going to be using beads that have a big enough hole. If a hole's not big enough, you can get a bead reamer, which is basically a file that's rounded, and you can ream it out and make it, yeah, I know it's not very big. You can ream it out and make it a bit bigger so that you can put whatever through.
Oh.
Reamer. Spelling. R-E-A-M-E-R, I want to say. It could be double E.
I'll double check it.
Thank you. It's also good, reamers are really good if you have beads that are painted. Sometimes it won't have a very good finish over the hole, and a reamer's a really good way of just getting that paint
It is
out.
REA.
It is REA.
Yeah.
I just said it didn't fail. So yeah, it's a really good way if you have painted beads to just get the little bit of paint that might be stopping your thread going through. Also, sometimes the paint can actually be quite sharp in a way, and it can damage your cord as you're pulling it through, so that will weaken your thread. So if you're using painted beads, sometimes they are like just dipped in paint. A lot of the pearl plastic beads are just dipped in paint to give them that pearl effect, and they don't always finish them off properly, so there will always be that, there can sometimes be that little bit of paint. Just take it off. Try not to use a craft knife, because you might slip and hurt yourself. I'm not really from experience at all. Cotton thread, so cotton thread is probably the most common. I've got some up here if people want to have a look at it later. It comes in all different colours and varieties, every colour under the sun, and it's relatively cheap. If you're looking at using seed beads, that's probably the one you're going to use. You've got elastic, so if you want something like a bracelet and you just want it to be a quick pop it over the wrist sort of thing, you need to use elastic cord. And there's nylon. Nylon is clear, so I've got it here, and it's really tough. It can withstand quite a bit before snapping. So I use this a lot in my little cute mascot thingies, like little chicken, little chick. because you can't see it once it's on. So if you want something to look like it's floating, you can use this. I also used it when a bit off tangent, but when I made my Vulpix tail, I used it to suspend it up, to hold it up. I attached it to my corset, and then my tail stayed on. So, multiple use. Different kinds of wire. You've got memory wire. I don't use memory wire a lot, just because I don't like how it feels when I wear it. It's just a personal thing. But memory wire is really good if you want something that's going to be like, if you want a hoop around your neck, then you really need to use memory wire to get that and keep it in a nice circle. It'll hold that shape for you no matter what you put on it. So if you put a big heavy pendant on it, over the day it's not going to start sagging and become a V, which if you try to do it with normal wire, it would. There's copper wire. Again, copper wire comes in all sorts of different colours, variations. Literally, again, you can buy packs of it, and it comes in a good 12 different varieties of colour. I've got some examples up here again. Precious metal. So again, you can use precious metal wire if you want to. I don't, because I don't think it's worth it. I don't think the cost of it's worth it at all. You can get spools like this for a good, £3, and I've used that quite a lot. And you know, they're good enough. You don't need to spend loads of money on precious metal stuff, especially if it's for costumes, because let's face it, you're going to wear it to the con, and then you're probably not going to wear it again. You might do every so often, but it's not going to become one of your staples. And tiger tail. So I mentioned tiger tail earlier. Tiger tail is a bit of a weird substance, in my opinion. It's a wire, but it's got a real flexity to it. So I don't know if you want to play with it. This is different. Don't worry if it unspools. It's not a problem. It's just a bit. It's got a bit more flex to it, and at the same time, it's kind of firmer. It's a very strange thing. Have a play with it, and you'll see what I mean. It also tends not to jank up so much. When you use wire for the first time, it will jank up. It will twist, it will turn, it will be a pain in your ass. And you will shout at it and scream at it and tell it it's the worst thing ever. But it's okay in the end. So, just, again, if that happens, take a moment, step away from it, make a cup of tea, calm yourself down, tell yourself it's not that bad, and go back. You can always attach wire to wire if you're very clever about it. You can start it. Same with thread. If you cut a piece of thread for a piece and it's not long enough, you can work it back. It sounds silly, but you can work that end back and then work an end into the necklace again, and then you just have another long piece. A lot of the patterns will tell you how to do that, so don't worry. Don't look at me too much. So it's just a way when I say working back in, it means you work back on your piece, and that works your end back into the piece and will secure it. Once it's secure, you can just attach another piece and move on. It's easier than it sounds. It's actually that's my last slide, but I can talk about anything anyone wants to. Yes.
The biggest problem that I have with wires, and I've got some of that tiger tail wire as well, and some of the nylon ones, is making neat finishes on the ends where you add findings to things. So, do I just do a pile of knots and make sure it never comes undone, or are there clever ways?
If your beads will allow it, if whatever you're using will allow it, like I say, working your way back through your work should secure it. So when I make these things, it's not with tiger tail, but it's with this wire. With this. All I do to finish it off is I work it back in, then I cut as close as I can to it. You can come and have a play with these later, don't you? You cut as close as you can, and then try and push those bits in, because obviously you don't want little pieces of wire sticking out.
Yeah. With the nylon and the tiger tail type of substances, I just feel like they're so springy that they'll work their way undone. But do I just have to have faith in it?
Yeah, if you work it long enough back, it shouldn't. Sometimes with tiger tail and that, you do have to work it a little bit further. With this, you only have to do it through like a couple of rows, But if I was using tiger tail, I probably wouldn't for this, but I would work quite far back. It's like with the loom. When you do the looms, you need to really work the threads back in. So as you can see with this piece, I didn't get to bring the loom needles, which I'm really bummed about because they're actually really cool. Loom needles are really long, so you could have threads all the way across it if you really wanted to. And rather than having to thread the needle through an eye at the end, they split in the middle, and then you just pop it through. It's like a massive hole, you just pop it through and it's done. So you're not sitting there for ages going, where's the, trying to get it in, because they're really fine, the loom needles, they're super fine. So it'd take forever if it was just an eye. Anyway, when you have these ends, once I would finish this piece, I would then take each strand and work it back into the piece. And that would give it all stability. Okay? Anyone else got any questions?
You said for when you've tied the nuts and stuff to use glue. What glue would you recommend?
Just PVA, anything that dries clear. Obviously don't apply like a massive blob of it. You don't need a lot. Even if you don't have something that has a fine tip on it for a PVA, you can get them in most craft shops. But if you don't, then just get a toothpick and just dab a little bit and dab it onto the knot. Okay? It will probably hide underneath the bead anyway once you've done it. So it won't show anyway. But it just gives you that little bit of confidence that it's not gonna. I'm really bad at it. I'm going to admit that now. I don't glue my knots, and it shows. For example, there is a little bit hanging out of my chick here that I haven't worked back in properly. So do take a little bit of time to do it. Don't do what I do. Do yourself. Anything else? Anyone got any projects they're looking at? Yeah.
Do you tend to, I know it's a thing, polymer clay, do you often, because I've used them before, like certain like pieces of jewellery and like brooches or something, like cosplay, and there'll be a specific shape that, you know, it's not something you can find, so you kind of have to make it from scratch. It's, would you recommend, you know, any particular, is it basically just any other female or?
Yeah, any of that sort of fine, most sort of stuff. And like I say, they do the kits that allow you to put holes through, so if you want to do it as a bead, then Fimo already do the kit for it, so it's probably the easiest way of doing it. The other way I sometimes do things is if you get a big enough bead and then just work around it with Fimo and then put it in the oven. As long as the bead isn't like plastic, don't use a plastic bead, it'll just melt. Or if it can withstand the temperature, you have to check. I'll do a test run. But yeah, form around it, and then you've got that bead in the middle, so you can just thread through. If you're doing a flat piece, it's fine. You do get flat bindings. So if you wanted to do a pendant, for example, I don't have the binding for it, but I do have some examples of shrink plastic. I love shrink plastic. It's amazing. It's so much fun. So you can cut shrink plastic into any size, any shape. I use dyes on mine because I'm also a colour crafter, so I have loads of steel dyes at home. And you can colour them, you can paint them, you can do whatever you want with them. Warbler as well. I've made warbler stuff before and put it onto different brooch backs and stuff. Obviously you do have brooch backings, they're quite common. A bit of hot glue will normally keep that in place. Or if you're using something like Fimo, you can even push it in, and then hopefully if you pushed it in enough, when you finish it in the oven, it should stay in place. I wouldn't guarantee it, I would still use some glue. But you can get flat back bindings that then have a loop on the top, and you can make it into a pendant. You can do that with, if you find like really nice precious stones and stuff. I've done that before. Does that help? Anything else?
What would you use to make like holes in things? So like, for example, like your lightning rods, I don't know if they're cable holes or not, but what would you personally use if you had something like that that you wanted to make and you needed to obviously make the hole for the jump ring? What would you use?
Depending on what the material is. For example, with shrink plastic, you can make holes in it, obviously. You have to make them bigger before you shrink them. Don't make that mistake. You can use bead reamers. So again, if it's already got a little bit of a start, you could use a reamer and just work your way through it. It's probably the best way of doing it, and it will give you the cleanest finish. You can always use a crocodile. I don't know if anyone's heard of a crocodile, but it's basically a massive hole punch, but it's on like an almost industrial scale, like power. So it goes through a lot of different stuff. So it's just crocodile. It's like huge. But yeah, and it does different sizes as well, so you can use different size. I don't think it would do two super tiny holes, but if you were looking to go through a big piece, if it was already made sort of thing, you'd be looking at sitting and reading it. It might take some time. Just sit, watch some anime, just sit there. Do it. Any other questions? No? Okay, that's all I have for you guys, but there is lots of goodies to have a look at. So please come up and have a look, peruse through books. There's plenty here. And if you want to ask me anything about anything on the table, just ask. Thank you very much.